Welcome to Scaling Impact, where we decode how entrepreneurs are harnessing the power of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to create remarkable and impactful businesses that drive transformation on a global and local human scale. We explore how sustainability is elevating our human consciousness and catalyzing us to create within constraints. We decipher why now is the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity since the dawn of industrialization and what leaders and entrepreneurs can do to harness the winds of change. I'm Anders Nielsen, global futurist, EO Sydney Impact Champion and father, and your co-host with Lisa Andrews for Scaling Impact.
Hi everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Scaling Impact, where we will be talking about SDG number 5, gender equality with Victoria Butt. Victoria is the founder and executive consultant at Parity Consulting. She's the founder and CTO at Evolve Sales Training, a board member for EO Sydney, an angel investor investing in females who are Black, Indigenous or people of colour, and she is passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging. Please join me in welcoming Victoria to talk about how she's scaling impact aligned with the SDGs.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about your history and why you're passionate about this topic.
So I'm passionate about equality, or inequality, should I say, for women and girls. And the reason is because for me, when I was brought up, it took me and probably until I was about 12 or 13 to really understand inequality. I'm very lucky I was brought up in England, working class family, worked very hard and had really strong role models. My mum and dad were very strong role models, and we were brought up to be able to do anything and tackle anything regardless of our gender. And of course we were from a white family, so I think we were already privileged. However, it wasn't until I was about 14 years old where I actually realised that it wasn't quite an equal playing field. And that didn't really affect me too much, and was very lucky to go on and travel to Australia. And it wasn't really until I got into a mid-level management role that I realised that there was a lot more inequality for females than I'd ever really experienced. And so for me, I was on a bit of a lifelong journey to find out why, and actually just try and assist my fellow peers and females to really understand where it came from. And that was probably about 15 years ago now.
That's great background. And so how has your work life then evolved to include your passion for this topic?
I think what's happened is as soon as I experienced my first real hardcore sort of being discriminated against because of I was different, I would like to say that I don't believe necessarily it was because I was a female. It's actually because I was just different. I walked, talked, acted, behaved, everything different. And being in an organisation where I was the only one at that level doing that, it wasn't that I was female. I was just different. So I experienced that at 25, and it took me about 3 years to work out that actually that was going on. And then for me, it's all just spiraled, and nothing doesn't have this touch in it. So when I talk about inequality, women, girls, everything, it's touched my life every day for 15 years. So for instance, I ended up leaving that business when I really sussed out and really kind of learned that I needed to stick up for myself a little bit more. And I set up my own business. I didn't intend to have a female-orientated business, but I now have 20 staff, of which 95% are female. We have a very much a female-led, and I should say not female, I should say feminine-led. We empower femininity. We empower masculinity. We don't put one on top of the other. I also have 100% female interns working in my business. My other business, Evolve Sales Training, is 50-50 in terms of employment. However, I have just set up BIPOC Fangle, which is a Black, Indigenous, people of colour, female angel investment only organisation, which I'm very, very excited about. And of course, being a part of EO for the last 5 years and really experiencing EO as a minority, and setting up the first diversity, equity and inclusion initiative. Actually, I believe in APAC for EO, which I did about 4 years ago, and I'm now on the board, and DEI sits kind of under my remit. I'm very active in the global EO community when it comes to females and getting more people in EO. My ultimate goal is to actually close the door on the leakage of females leaving EO. So for me, it's not just about recruiting females, and of course we need the right females and we need the right males. It's not just about any female. They need to absolutely walk and talk the values of EO, but they also really need they need to meet the criteria that we have, and we have there for a reason. The challenge is that they're leaving as quickly as they come in, and that is what I've been on a mission in Sydney to stop and close the door on.
That's really fascinating, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation today because I haven't really felt discriminated against myself. And so growing up, my dad didn't live with us, so it was my mum and my brother and sister and I, and so I didn't really know and experience what it was like to have the two genders as role models and parents in the household, and so I just completely adored my mum. And so in working as well, I've always had a huge amount of opportunities, and I guess now as a professional speaker and futurist, I'm getting more opportunity because there's not enough females, and I guess that's driven by people who are really highlighting diversity and inclusion. So I guess for me, I'm a benefactor of the amazing work that you're doing and that others are doing. So I'm very grateful for that. And I guess it's almost the blinkers that I've put on as well, I think. So I think it's Tony Robbins who says you get what you focus on. And if you're driving down the street and thinking, don't hit the pole, don't hit the pole, don't hit the pole, you may hit the pole. So, I guess sometimes, for me, I love my little happy bubble. So I'd love for you to share just, I'll take the blinkers off. I want to hear about, some of those challenges, and particularly, if it's in EO and women are leaving. I know that we've got really great, strong women in EO Sydney. And so what are some of the other chapters around the world like, and what are those main challenges?
Yeah, look, very, very different as you would expect in terms of cultures. And so you have, beautiful Japanese. We have Tokyo, who are an incredible chapter. I was lucky to go over there a few years back. They have 2 chapters, I understand, in Tokyo. They did have then. I couldn't tell you their female rates, but I know that they are particularly low. And then we have other places where they are higher than we have in Sydney. So at the moment we have in Sydney 26% of females in Sydney, and we are considered to be the highest in APAC, I understand. But there is higher. I know that there's a 28. I know San Fran at one stage had nearly 30%, which was great. Look, I think EO is doing a really good job on DEIB, as we now know it. So that's belonging at the end. And I think that I know I've personally been in part of the global working group on focusing on forum experience, focusing on communications, and also focusing on recruitment. And Carrie Santos is very much the sponsor, and we've done a lot of work. As with any organisation of our size, it does take a while to trickle down. It's been really good in Sydney though. We have full autonomy to do loads of cool stuff. So, the board this year is amazing. It's 50-50. In fact, I think it's slightly skewed to more females. And we have had some really good representation of females for a while now. But there's low-hanging fruit that you can do. I mean, we have an inclusion statement on the EO Sydney website. It's in our bylaws. We've rewritten, we've had the Constitution rewritten. It's more inclusive language. There's actually small things that mean a lot to people. If you can't see it, you can't be it, right? So when I first looked at this, the EO website, years ago, was like, a bunch of men standing around drinking. it's like, well, that's not kind of, I don't look like any of those people. And so what we've done is we've brought in a lot more diversity in the pictures. We've avoided stock pictures for that reason of authenticity. And we've actually partnered as a partnership company, an SAP, a photographer to come in and take some really cool sort of, real-time pictures. So there's a lot that you can do at a chapter level, but ultimately, the Globe are doing some great things and it will be trickling down, and it has done already. So it's an exciting initiative. It's got a way to go, but it's already moved already.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting the lesson there, opening our eyes and ears as well. So, being able to see those things and just tuning in to the challenge as it is. And even language I find so important. So how do you actually pull people up when they're using certain language and non-inclusive language?
The language is a huge thing. And I never forget someone talking to me about how they decided to leave a forum because someone had said to them, to a female, you've got balls, you've got balls. And it was, and the female was really offended by it. And it depends on what culture you're from and, how it was said and how it was intended and all of the rest of it. But I think using those kind of man up, you've got balls, all of that type of thing, I just don't think it's helping our EO community. I don't know if you've heard this, but I've been fascinated to hear that little boys know that they can't be feminine around 5 years old. So I'll give you the researcher in a second because I actually have it here because I've known this stat for a while, but I actually had to hunt down the researcher. But little girls, they get to teens and then they realise that they, if they want connection and they want relationship, they can't say what they think. And so it's about 12 or 13 for girls, for young girls, to realise that society requires them to do a certain thing. Whereas boys, it's actually 5. And I have a 6-year-old, so this is really real to me. And my 6-year-old loves all sorts of dancing around in dresses and, he's got a tutu like his sister and things. And I was walking down just in northern Queensland just recently and he was wearing his tutu. It's just such a moot point. It's like he's wearing his dress again. It's what he chooses. We don't choose to make a big deal out of it. He got more looks and all sorts of comments from all shapes and sizes and demographics of individuals in northern Queensland. And it was amazing how society actually has changed us as human. It's like culture versus humans. And I think that as individuals, and I appreciate the world has gone a bit crazy. No one can say anything without being cancelled these days. And I get that. And, I try and be really balanced about these things. But I think EO as a community we could do better at these colloquialisms and sayings and, all these things that actually can disempower people, whether it's females, minorities, anyone that is the minority in the room. And that's also for men as well. So I run a really strong female-orientated business and the men that we have in the business, oh my goodness, I spend more time with them making sure that I understand how they received things and how they're feeling about being in this culture where they're the minority than anything. So it goes both ways.
I'd love to actually drill down on something that you said just now around being cancelled. And so I'm seeing this as a huge mega trend at the moment. And so for 2022, I believe it's something that we're all conscious about after Will Smith was cancelled and, his career may not be so great in the future from one action. And I was in Africa this year and in South Africa, and I was talking to someone, they shared that they were actually cancelled as an entire country back in the 90s with apartheid. And so how long does being cancelled last? And then thirdly, as an example I'm part of a multinational CEO group, and there's a number of CEOs of really big companies who are really afraid to do the wrong thing because they may be cancelled. And so do you have any advice for our listeners and our audience who are probably business owners and running their businesses who are afraid of this topic or that they might do something wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Lisa, I've been cancelled gazillions of times in gazillions of forums because I wasn't really one of those 12, 13-year-olds that listened to the culture and told to sort of quieten my voice. So I've always been quite loud with my opinions, even when I was younger, according to my mother, of course. Look, I think this is very tricky territory. And I think that if you're in a CEO position, you're in a senior leadership position, and a leader of a business like we are, you are on show every day. And if you can't rise to that and you can't cope with having tricky conversations, then you probably shouldn't be in the seat, because yes, this is very much a cancel culture, but this is no real difference to how it's been forever. It's just a case of people going to call you out about it now, and absolutely it will damage your business and your reputation. For me, I've said some stupid things, done some stupid things, just we're human beings. For me, my best experience share, because I think that giving advice in this is very tricky, because you just don't know you don't know the story of the person receiving it. Everyone's got their own story. And I honestly believe that very few people come from a bad place. Most people will come from just such a terrific place with this stuff. They genuinely didn't mean to say what they said, unless someone's going to touch your boobs. I mean, that is just a hard no. But if we're talking about, making an innuendo or something like that, yeah, sure, absolutely unacceptable. But does that mean, we should throw the baby out with the bathwater? The punishment should often fit the crime, and I'm a believer of that. Best thing that I've seen recently in my experience in my businesses, so my recruitment business, my main clients are executives, mainly men, and I have seen and witnessed and heard and some abominable stories. I think the key thing is to listen. Listen with an open heart and an open mind, and leave your ego at the door. When people challenge me on this stuff, oh, you hate men. No, I don't. I love my husband dearly, and I love my boyfriend. I've got lots of men who are friends. I love them dearly. Or the other rebuttal is, what's the other one? Oh, it's okay for you because, this stuff doesn't exist. It's in your mind, all of the typical rebuttals you get. You often get them from the same demographic of people, the people that perhaps have also felt discrimination themselves, or they feel that they've had it particularly hard. They've been particularly poor growing up and they've had to fight for itself. So why should women suddenly have preferential treatment? Because they feel the playing field is equal. However, the playing field has not been equal. It's never been equal. So for me, whenever I witness situations where I think that's excellent, you get the people that perhaps have done or said or been in an environment where they have often not said anything. Actually, if you look at the bystander behaviour, that's far more prevalent than the other stuff, the discrimination, the sexual harassment, all the rest of it. Yes, we hear about that stuff, but being a bystander makes up for about 90% of discrimination and women feeling unequal or excluded. So where I've seen it work really well is ego at the door, listen, approach it with an open heart, and don't make it about you. See, this is the thing. It's not about you. It's not about the person who's messed up. Will Smith can't make it about him, his problems, his this, his that. I'm sort of sick of reading it now. Actually has to be about, the person on the recipient and other people. And a lot of people can't do that. They can't look beyond their own views, beliefs, and perhaps pain. One of the worst discriminations that I've been involved with, so bad, the person that did it, I actually had such a soft heart towards him in the end, because he had experienced such disgusting discrimination and such a terrible upbringing, and really, really had a sort of a serious story, that a lot of his actions and words and everything that he did, I mean, was really just coming from that side. Sure, I don't want to be friends with him. I don't want to see him ever again. But does that mean, I have to, hate on him? No.
So I've got a sore point on equality. And so it's absolutely, you're talking about being a bystander. And I think that actually goes both ways as well. And I'll give an example. I was just earlier in the year in Barbados, invited by the Prime Minister of Barbados. So we had some really significant people at this event, and I was hosting a panel. And part of that panel, we were talking about investing and, what's one thing that people can do to actually have a really big impact. And one of the panelists said, invest more in girls, women and girls, and got a huge cheer and everything. And, and I said, and don't forget about the men. So it was a little bit more just invest purely in girls or something like that. And I said, well, maybe equally girls and boys, but it's actually about equal opportunity. And so for me, this is where we're getting into that era of hyper-personalization. And so it's not particularly girls or boys, women or men. It's how do you actually empower people to help them achieve their goals and have the impact that they want to have, and so not discriminate against the men as well. And I'll use that as a segue because I know it's just a point there of not being a bystander. So that's, I think we can all just know what's equal and do the right thing in any given situation. But I want to give more perspective and contrast, I guess, to the equality and empowering women and girls conversation, because this is a huge thing. And globally, and particularly to have an entire SDG based around this. A couple of stats around women's equal participation. And so currently women represent about 25% in national parliaments, 36% in local government, and 28% in managerial positions worldwide. And so this is actually where we are swinging the pendulum a little bit to make it a little bit more equal. But the SDG primarily is around some really horrific things around violence against women. And I know there's violence against men as well, but against women it is huge. And then there's also an additional 10 million girls at risk of child marriage over the next decade because of the pandemic. So in addition to the 100 million people who are predicted to become child brides already. So let's talk about the macro big picture, I guess, and put a little bit of perspective into some of these conversations.
Oh, yeah, happy to. Yeah, look, the bystander conversation is just such a huge one. And the whole kind of investing in boys and girls, oh my goodness, could be here forever on this one. Look, I think at the end of the day, whenever you want to make change, there has to be targets in place and there has to be passion and movement and let's invest in girls, unfortunately, there has to be that. And the reason is that the gender pay gap is, let's just look at that, right, from a macro point of view. That hasn't moved in 20 years. That is still the same number that it was 20 years ago, right? So that's between 15 and 18% difference. Women are retiring with 28% less super than men in Australia. So I'm going to talk Australian stats at the moment because that's what I'm really sort of more au fait with.
And I'm hearing an action just quickly in there for all of our members and listeners to actually think about the gender pay gap, go through their records and see if there's a gap in their business, and similarly in manager roles.
You know what? I work with executives every day that do the same. So in Australia, we have Workplace Gender Equality Agency, which is a Julia Gillard initiative. There's 120 companies that are part of that. And if you are WGEA, they call it WGEA, if you are WGEA accredited, you are given more maternity leave. Your pay equity is the gap is less. You are given paternity leave. As we know, without paternity leave and without affordable childcare, we're still going to have the same problem. Because the gender pay gap, what's really interesting is people say to me, oh, the gender pay gap is there because women have babies. And all women want to have babies. Do they? All women want to have long maternity leaves. Do they? So we have all of these kind of predisposed cultural views about this. But the reality is the pay gap for graduates in Australia is 3% different for boys and girls. I shouldn't say boys and girls, I should say identifying with men and identify with being female. It's different at uni. It's different. It gets worse at postgrad. And then what happens, it goes up the chain for years to come. And then when we look at women live longer, and women from a pensionable age will make up about 54% of females entitled to sort of government state pension, that type of thing. However, women are actually nearly 30%, have 30% less super than men. Some of the other stats are really, quite alarming. My problem is they haven't changed in 20 years. So at the moment, the World Equality Index, Australia is 44th on that index in 2020. 2017, we were 35. We were 35th. So there's countries above Australia like Costa Rica, Namibia, Rwanda, Ireland, New Zealand is number 6. We're going down. We're not going up. And of course, people globally perhaps don't sort of care about that type of thing when they don't sort of live in Australia. But I think what's really crazy is unless we have some of these big, bold moves, like let's invest in girls, why in 20 years is it going to be any different? Because it hasn't been different yet. So that's my kind of macro view, if you like, on some of this stuff.
That's really interesting. And so I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the future. If you could wave a magic wand, then what would the future look like, let's say in 10 years' time?
I'd be like I was when I was 12 years old, when my best friend, who was from South America, was getting teased for being dark. And I was in my world thinking, what on earth are they talking about? It was such a weird feeling. Beautiful blinkers, Lisa. It was blinkers. It was beautiful. I think also we have some incredible men and women out there who are really passionate about this stuff. And so instead of ostracizing and trying to cancel those people is listen, perhaps. But also I'm a raving feminist. Anyone that's met me for 2 minutes can see that. And for me, it's about making sure that people like me also listen and make sure our messaging doesn't look aggressive, or our messaging is all about us listening to. So I do believe that we won't have a gender pay gap in the next 20 years. I have to believe that. And I also believe that we're going to be like Sweden, perhaps, who give 480 days of full maternity pay to their, or should I say parental leave. So Sweden's leading the way on parental leave, so that we don't have to worry about who goes to work and when. Childcare is affordable, so that it's not a question, perhaps.
Interesting. And so typically we ask our members as well and our guests on the podcast here how the aligning with impact has been beneficial for their business and helping them scale. Have you found that in your business?
Look, I think I have. I have to say, for me, I've run my own race, and my clients tell me I've impacted them massively. We place executives. We place 67% of our roles in executive hiring, and they're all female. 67% are female for our executives. We have some internal targets here. We do not allow any executive shortlist to go out the door unless it's at least 50-50. We believe we can make a small difference as a search firm and a recruitment firm. I hire 95% of my hires are female in terms of the businesses that I run as well. So I believe I've made an impact. Look, I actually just want to make an impact to my to anyone that I meet, anyone that I can talk to. And my children, I don't want my 5-year-old to stop wearing tutus because he's shamed. And I don't want my 6-year-old to get to 12 and stop talking. So if I can impact them, then that's a start. I really struggle with sharing how amazing I've done in this world because I'm not even started, in terms of the gender stuff.
That's brilliant. And so do you have any actions that you'd love for our listeners to take?
Start with inclusion before you start messing around with diversity. If you don't have a diverse workforce, start with inclusion. Understand what really matters to your female staff members or your minority staff members really matters, and everyone is so different. I think it's also about critically looking at your own workforce, and I mean critically. So I'm acutely aware that I don't have a diverse workforce, and that is something that I'm actively working on. I have diversity in lots of other ways, but I don't have a gender diverse workforce, and that is something that I am working very hard to change. I think any entrepreneur and business owner already have it very, very hard, and I think that putting the DEIB on top of it is just another thing to do. So I think slow and steady, critically look at your workforce. Do they all look, feel, and think the same? Most people come back to me and say, oh, mine all think differently, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but they are all look the same, or they all feel the same. So I think if you can critically do that, you don't need to hire an inclusion expert or diversity expert. I also think it's really important to listen to the individuals in your business that perhaps have been there the shortest. And why I say that is you've got about 3 months before someone's indoctrinated into your business, especially as an entrepreneur or as a smaller business, because they do it for the passion and the love. And so after 3 months, they lose their truth and tell you how they see things. That first 4 weeks is critical. So interview any new starter over that 4 weeks with a DEIB lens. How did you feel? How did you think? What was your first impression? What would you do differently? Put yourself in my shoes for a week. Tell me what you'd do. It's not just about social justice. It's actually looking at, according to Wagia, the women CEOs, the female CEOs, actually make their profit is 20 million more on average than the male CEO. So we are actually looking at, something that's good for business. I think everyone would agree that diversity is good for business and problem solving. I feel like that isn't something that many people will say isn't. So I think if you can get those people in 3 months before they start saying exactly what you want them to say, then that would be really helpful as well.
It'd be really interesting, actually, if in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, we're actually talking about how to get more neural diversity into our businesses as opposed to just gender. That would be a really nice place to get to.
My goodness, absolutely. That is, I think we've only just started and we've got so much to do. It's not just gender. I think it's just one of the easier ones to combat first.
Brilliant. Victoria, we're almost at time, so I'm going to ask you if you're ready for some quick fire questions.
Oh my goodness. I think I've had dreams about this, or nightmares, should I say. Yeah, I'll do my best, Lisa.
And thank you to Tim Ferriss for putting these questions together. They're a great way to finish off. So, what purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
A heater, because I'm constantly cold.
If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, metaphorically speaking, getting a message out to millions or billions, what would it say and why?
Clear is kind, unclear.
Very nice. What is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love?
Shark diving.
In the last 5 years, what have you become better at?
Meetings without an agenda.
And do you have any final actions or comments to share with our listeners today?
Listen first, judge later. Or actually, don't judge. Listen first. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And we do have 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So use them in that appropriate proportion. That's lovely. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today on Scaling Impact. And it's been an incredible conversation learning how that we can actually take action within our businesses. So thank you, and see you all next time on Scaling Impact.
Thank you for tuning in to Scaling Impact. Make sure you subscribe to the show in your podcatcher, and we'd be super grateful if you leave us a great review. For more information about Scaling Impact, the Entrepreneurs Organisation, or our work on sustainable innovation, please check out EO Sydney online. we would appreciate if you can take a moment to share the podcast with a friend or a colleague and help build the movement. We hope that what we learn together on scaling impact can help us all build a sustainable future for ourselves and our children. See you in the near future.